Hello everyone! Welcome to Blood, Guts, and Social Commentary. Today will be part 4 of our look at public domain horror films. 1959, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Aliens resurrect dead humans as zombies and vampires to stop humanity from creating a sort of sun-driven bomb. Now, before you all get too excited that one of the worst movies ever is public domain, this applies only to the black and white version. The colorized version is absolutely not public domain. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of legal gibberish because really that's what it is. Essentially, it wasn't immediately registered for copyright. The copyright was filed in 81, which, again, this movie was made in 59. And there was a renewal issued by Wade Williams in 1986. The problem is Kathy Wood, who was Ed Wood's second wife, was married to him until he passed, was claimed as heir, but it seems like on the paperwork, his first wife, Norma McCarthy, was listed as Mrs. Edward D. Wood Jr.'s successor, and all right of the estate of Edward D. Wood Jr. She wasn't, though, because their marriage had been annulled. Everything at this point was operating under the Reynolds Pictures, Inc. label for their IP, but there's been a whole bunch of back and forth, so it did fall into public domain. As a black and white version only, my guess is somebody did some restorative work or colorized that work, meaning they've altered it enough at this point that they can claim it as their intellectual property. Another really good example of this is the movie Metropolis. Metropolis has been public domain for quite some time, to my understanding, but there's been several people that have found new footage and put it in, or there was even a case where somebody completely rescored the movie. That is enough for that rescored version to no longer be in public domain, since that person has intellectual property on the score that is now backing Metropolis. That specific version they can claim copyright on, while Metropolis as it stands is still in public domain. I hope that makes some kind of sense. It's a very weird, very gray area, but there are times where you can pull something out of public domain if you do enough to it and release it as kind of a different thing. 1959, The Killer Shrews. An isolated island, a small group of people are terrorized by giant, ferocious shrews in the midst of a hurricane, because being attacked by killer shrews isn't bad enough. 1959, Manster. I did pronounce that right. Manster, not monster. An American reporter in Japan is sent to interview an eccentric Japanese scientist working on bizarre experiments in his mountain laboratory. When the doctor realizes that the hapless correspondent is the perfect subject for his next experiment, he drugs the unfortunate man and injects him with a serum that gradually transforms him into a hideous, two-headed monster. 1959, A Bucket of Blood. A naive and untalented artist finds a claim for a plaster-covered dead cat that is mistaken as a skillful statuette. The desire for more praise soon leads to an increasingly deadly series of work. If you're familiar with Roger Corman's work, or familiar with me constantly talking about how cheap he is, you're probably wondering how this fell into public domain. Again, this fell into the whole people didn't see a reason to copyright protect it because the home video market hadn't quite happened yet. And also sometimes it seems like Corman and other directors would allow certain things to lapse and let them go to protect other things, or they just didn't care so much about them because it wasn't as profitable as their other works. So they didn't quite see a point in keeping the copyright, because you do have to pay to continue to copyright. So if you're really, really cheap, it's not a great long-term strategy, but it makes sense why you would drop a copyright. 1959, Attack of the Giant Leeches. A backwoods game warden and a local doctor discover that giant leeches are responsible for disappearances and deaths in a local swamp, but the local police don't believe them. This also received the Mystery Science Theater 3000 treatment and was released on the Mystery Science Theater 3000 Collection Volume 6. 1959, Beast of the Haunted Cave. A group of gold thieves pull off a heist and flee into the snowy wilderness, only to be pursued by a horrible spider-like monster. That is a whole lot of Nope City. 1959, Teenage Zombies. A crazed female scientist uses nerve gas to turn local teenagers into her unquestioning slaves. 1959, The Giant Gila Monster. A giant lizard terrorizes a rural Texas community, with a heroic teenager attempting to destroy the creature. 1959, House on Haunted Hill. A millionaire offers $10,000 to 5 people who agree to be locked in a large, spooky rented house overnight with him and his wife. 1959, Teenagers from Outer Space. A young alien falls for a pretty teenaged Earth girl. They team up to try and stop the plans of his invading cohorts, who intend to use Earth as a food breeding ground for giant lobsters from their planet. The invaders, who arrive in a flying saucer, carry deadly ray guns that turn Earth people into skeletons. This one fell into public domain because there was a failure to re-register it at the 28th year mark after its creation, which is a rule with renewing copyrights. It also got the MST3K treatment and is also part of the collection volume 6. 1960, City of the Dead, aka Horror Hotel. A young co-ed uses her winter vacation to research a paper on witchcraft in New England. Her professor recommends that she spend her time in a small village called Whitewood. He originally came from the village, so he also recommends that she stay at Raven's Inn, run by Miss Newells. She gets to the village and notices some weird happenings, but things begin to happen in earnest when she finds herself marked for sacrifice by the undead coven of witches. It seems that the innkeeper is actually the undead spirit of Elizabeth, and the guests in the inn are the other witches who have come to celebrate the sacrifice on Kamala's Eve. As one of them says when the co-ed walked by, he will be pleased. 1960, The Little Shop of Horrors. A clumsy young man nurtures a plant and discovers that it's carnivorous, forcing him to kill to feed it. This fell into public domain because this is also Corman work. This is not the musical. Corman just had no faith in this one ever really turning a profit after its initial theatrical run, so he just didn't bother to copyright it. The big thing to note about this one is Jack Nicholson. This was one of his earlier roles, so this is noteworthy because of that, as well as it was later remade into the musical. 1960, Atom Age Vampire. A stripper is horribly disfigured in a car accident. A brilliant scientist develops a treatment that restores her beauty and falls in love with her. To preserve her appearance, the doctor must give her additional treatments using glands taken from murdered women. His unexplained ability to turn into a hideous monster helps with this problem, but does nothing to win her love. The doctor's woes multiply as the police and the girl's boyfriend begin to close in on him. 1960, Horrors of Spider Island, aka Body in the Web. Survivors of a plane crash on a remote island find it's covered by spiders. When bitten, the survivors start turning into spiders, making more spiders. So just spiders on spiders on spiders, apparently. 1960, Tormented. A man lets a former flame fall to her death rather than let her intervene with his new relationship, but her ghost returns to disrupt his impending nuptials. This will conclude part 4 of our look at public domain horror films. If you like what you're hearing, please hit like, comment, subscribe. If you don't like what you're hearing, please leave me a comment and let me know. And today's YouTube channel spotlight is The Paranormal Scholar. As the name implies, they talk about things that have to do with the paranormal in an academic fashion, without it being dry as the term sometimes academic might imply. They talk about different haunted histories, different paranormal events, including hauntings, demonic possessions, and just overall weird things, as well as do an analysis of the event itself. They also narrate subscriber-submitted stories. It's obvious that a lot of time, effort, and research go into each and every episode, and it's absolutely fascinating to watch things that scientifically normally are a bit dubious be handled in such an academic way. So if you haven't already, go check out The Paranormal Scholar, give him a subscription, tell him I sent you. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy.